record on this computer. Hello, my name is Paul with Business Club. I'm here today with Laurie-ann Sheldrick. So, Laurie-ann Sheldrick is a life coach, educator, and host of the Sisterhood podcast. She specializes in reprogramming limiting beliefs and emotional management. In 2009, while she was working to heal her own inner world, a man at work said, "You are so effing contagiously positive." And she decided to use her new superpowers by becoming a certified life coach so that she could help other women unleash their inner contagiously positive, maybe positivity. She's so grateful that she has a privilege to be coaching the most incredible women since 2012 and opening her own practice. She helps women strengthen their emotional, mental attitude and spiritual muscles so they can live of a life empowered, authentic, and joyful. So they no longer do this by bypassing their inner work and going all in on the programming on the brain to work and work for us instead of against us. So please welcome Laurie-ann Sheldrick.
Hello. Thank
Sorry I
you so
butchered your
much.
intro a bit there, but that's okay.
That is totally okay. I don't
All right.
mind at all.
Okay, perfect. Well, so great to have you, Laurie. And this is the first time we've had a chance to connect. And you're going to be speaking at Adapt and Overcome on Saturday, June 19th. So we're really excited to hear your presentation there. But first, we wanted to do a little bit of deeper dive and learn more about you. And, first thing that I found really interesting is that your background is actually in project management. You
Yes.
worked in construction for quite a few years. So tell us about your sort of your origins and what you learned from your background in project management.
Yeah. So I graduated with a business degree and took that business degree. I moved to Ottawa, Ontario, and got a job with a general contracting firm and slowly worked up my ranks there and worked at that same company for 10 years. So project coordination, project management, it was absolutely wonderful. It was a really good experience. Construction, especially in the general contracting field, is an interesting arena to be in. At the time, I was the only woman who typically was working on site. The first half of my career there, I was in the office. And the second half, I was on site and I was the only woman. So it was very, very interesting. And more women came in, thankfully, throughout my time there.
Now, would you
But
say interesting and would you say uncomfortable? Like,
it
was
was
there
so
some,
uncomfortable.
was there a lot of like sort of abusive comments that were made towards you?
They're not necessarily. Sometimes, yes. People learned very early on with me that I didn't allow that. I had a couple gentlemen make some inappropriate sexual comments, and I just nipped that right in the bud.
Good for
And
you.
that was really good. So that felt really empowering, but of course, very uncomfortable. I'm also an incredibly feminine woman in a very masculine industry. And that was challenging because I always had this like push and pull of, do I need to be more masculine? Do I need to look more masculine? Do I have to dress a different way? And the answer to that was no. I just really let my femininity
Yeah, well,
shine because
good
it
for
was
you. It actually
wonderful.
reminds me of someone I once know. She was actually a mother of one of my former guitar students. She worked as like holding the stop signs. You know, you turn the stop signs back and forth, and she got a lot of abuse, and it turned into a big like there's a court case and like
Oh my
lawsuits, and
goodness.
it was like a big whole mess and like distress, and that went on for years. I couldn't the fact that you can just nip it in the butt and
Yes.
get over that. I mean, because else you just get dragged into like a nightmare
Very much
of
so.
energy.
Knowing what I know now because of what I've learned in, my experience 9 years being a coach, what I know that I did then, which I didn't know I was doing then, I just thought it was just my hot-blooded Italian, temper. But what I was doing is I was creating very, very healthy boundaries. It's just, this is how you're going to treat me. And if not, I'm not here for it. So I always was really, I guess that way, that was like a very masculine side of me that came out was, here's my boundary. I'm not going to be treated any other way than with respect. And setting that boundary really helped me. And it helped me in the industry because I really believe, especially with the team that I worked with, one, they knew how to treat me, but they also knew that I was always going to respect them. And we just had this really beautiful, like, cohesive team going on. Everyone knew that we could just respect each other, and there was a better way of working together in that industry that wasn't so hard, wasn't so aggressive, wasn't so abusive, because it can be a very abusive industry. There's a lot of fires to put out, and there's a lot of stress going on, and there's a lot on the line financially when you're building these very large buildings. So that just gets people's attitudes like very, very high and
Mm.
very, very tense. And I think just I was really lucky with the team that I worked with, because even though we went through our challenges, we had a very open communication that happens when you can set those clear boundaries and not let things get to the point where, all right, I'm just going to let you treat me that way because it's so uncomfortable to tell you not to.
Mm.
And it's uncomfortable, but only for a moment.
Yeah, no, good for you. And I'm really interested to learn about your background in project management and how have
Yeah.
you applied those skills to your own business as a life coach from
Mm,
what you learned from mastering those skills in a very competitive industry
mm.
in project management.
The biggest thing for me was actually on the project management side was really creating this very, very good schedule, this really amazing plan. Like, you just become an amazing planner when you're in project management because you have no choice. You have the tightest deadlines when you're building a building. You're building a 10-story condominium building with retail on the bottom, that owner saying, this is my deadline, I have people moving in on this date. You become a very good planner. So that really helped me when I started my own business, because I was able to put structures in place right away on the business side, on the financial side, setting goals, really laying out that groundwork. Even though it was a different industry, the skills are all transferable. So that was so incredibly helpful. But what was also helpful was the problem solving. I am a master problem solver now because that's construction. You are constantly solving problems. Like, it's such an amazing industry, because as much as we know how to build these buildings, things always come in, problems always arise, because you want to be innovative as a general contractor as well, building these beautiful buildings, and architects have these big dreams, and then we come in as the general contractor and we're just like, that's never been done before, right? So that's really helped me be a problem solver. I'm very proactive instead of reactive. And that's something that I've learned in the construction industry that I take in this industry, in my coaching industry, being able to take a step back and saying, what can I do this week to set up my business in a way that I can be proactive if there is anything that comes up, so that I can just be available for my clients, because the business side of it's already all been taken care of because I have all of that planned out. So I'm not sitting there being reactive every week, like, what can I do in my business to market it? What do I need to do on the sales side? I already have that all planned out, so I can just focus on my clients, which is so phenomenal. And I learned that in construction. It's been really, really phenomenal skills to take over into my life coaching practice.
That's great. So, with your life coaching practice, what do you find is what most people or most women that you meet with are struggling with these days that you're helping them with?
Yeah, it's the mental and emotional health. That is the biggest struggle, especially when we work in high stress environments. And I mean, hello, welcome to high stress the past 15 months with the global pandemic. That's been the biggest thing. And one of the hardest things that the women who come to me have a really challenging time embracing is that they're so focused on, just teach me how to solve the external problem. And I'm like, yeah, but when the external problem goes away, you still have the emotional and mental impact of that. So we have to deal with that. And they struggle with that because that's not a quick fix. So there's a longer process there, and we want this quick fix. So do I, right? I don't want to have to go through all the healing work all the time. But we really get deep into, well, the triggers. So one of the things I always say to my clients is, you're what you're doing is you're preparing yourself for the next global pandemic. Like that's what we're doing. I remember saying this. I really struggled mentally and emotionally when the global pandemic first hit because I lost most of my revenue it being a speaker. And one of the things I kept saying to myself was, I have been preparing for this for the past 20 years. Like, this is why I do the mental, emotional, attitudinal, physical, and spiritual work. I have been preparing for this for years. And I just kept that mantra in my mind because it's like, you have the tools. And that's what I really want to give to my clients when they come and they're like, I just want the quick fix. And I'm like, but the quick fix doesn't include the tools. I can't tell you how to solve the external problems because the problem is we're constantly going to have external stuff coming at us. So we got to take care of our inner world. And I learned that in construction as well, because construction's very stressful. I knew very early on, if I don't keep my inner world strong, I'm not going to be able to make it in construction. And I almost didn't. I burnt out because I wasn't taking care of my inner world. There was just so much external stress. And once I started to go within, I started to realize, oh, okay, I can actually handle this and I can go home and not feel burnt out all the time.
So how do you help your clients improve their inner world?
Yeah, so it it varies depending on what the women are coming obviously for into when we're chatting. So it does vary, but the thing I focus on the most is going through one, figuring out what's going on up here in your mind, what's going on mentally, who's running the show. So I call it the saboteur versus your inner guide. And your saboteur is that voice that, if you think about it from a stressor point of view, that saboteur is the one who's saying, life is just meant to be stressful. My job is just meant to be stressful. I'm just meant to be stressed every single day. So what and then you're making decisions from that stressful state all the time, or it can be a limiting belief. So what we always get clear on, who's making the decisions for you? Is it this saboteur voice who's telling you nothing is ever going to get better? This is just the way the life is. Or do you have another guidance system that's leading the show? Of course, if they're coming to me, right, it's usually that sabotaging voice. So that's the first step. Who's making your decisions for you? Because once we can get clear about that, then we can work on the emotional aspect of it. What's happening emotionally and physically when that trigger comes up? We always know our body tells us before our mind ever tells us. Our bodies, we start to feel it. We start to get anxious. We start to feel it in our stomach, or we start to get tense. We start to like constrict. So we get very clear about those things first. We get very clear about what the triggers are, what the stressors are, and then we start to put it all together and then figure out, all right, what are daily practices that you can incorporate into your life to start to reprogram your brain to work for you instead of against you? Because we're just habitual. The way we think, the decisions we make, the actions we take, the reactions we have, the responses, our attitude, that's all habitual. So that's why, that's why I said there is no quick fix, because we have to reprogram our brain, which is creating new neural pathways, new ways of thinking, new ways of reacting and responding. And that doesn't happen overnight, right? Like, I have a hot blooded Italian temper. It took me a really long time to get myself out of that story. Well, okay, but that's just a story you tell. You actually don't have to react from that place, right? So that's typically where I start. I start at the beginning. What's going on mentally? Who's leading the show? Who's making the decisions? What are the habits? What is that repetition? What are your current programs and beliefs? And then we start to unpack it and we start to put new stuff in. And it's
Yeah.
different for every single woman.
Well, it's just while you're speaking of this, it just reminds me of, I just think of my wife too. She's because she's a teacher, and she often gets like feels really stressed out at the end of the day with all these kids like,
Yes.
acting out, and then she gets on. Then our girls are acting in that,
Mm-hmm.
and then this and you just tell like the stress and the rage sometimes that builds out,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's just like she just like completely shuts down, like is
Yeah.
like just wants to be alone in her in the bed and stuff, and so I can totally see what you're talking about. Like, I see it firsthand, like the stress
Yes.
and that build up, and just So what would what's our ways to cope with things like just daily stress of work and
Yes.
family?
Well, let's use your wife's example because she actually had the solution in what her body naturally wanted to do, which was go rest. So let's just imagine her day, right? She's a teacher and she has stuff being thrown at her all the time, right? Kids, they have questions, they probably maybe not listening. So her nervous system is on high alert all day.
Well, it's also the
Then,
changes, the constant changes, right? To
oh
virtual learning and
gosh,
learning a new
yes.
system, and then not knowing what's
Mhm.
it's Sunday night, not knowing what you're going to do Monday.
Yeah. So imagine what's going on in your nervous system, right? You're in a constant like fight or flight state. Your nervous system is saying constantly all day, I have fires to put out. I have stuff, right? So she never actually has this opportunity to just relax and be in a state. So then she comes home and that continues. So there's multiple things that I would recommend because here's the thing, the external stressor is not going away. So we got to focus on what can we do internally. So what I recommend, and this is what I did when I was in the construction industry, and I still do it today, but my job's not really stressful today. So I don't have to do that as often. Throughout the day, I highly recommend 10 minutes. If you only have 5, just take 5. But if you're saying I only have 5, try to take 10 because it probably means you need more. 5 minutes a day, every 90 minutes, every 2 hours, whenever you can take a moment, go somewhere, put your nervous system in a calm state. Don't bring any gadgets with you, no noise, nothing, and just breathe. 5 deep breaths in, 5 deep breaths out. It's the simplest thing you can do throughout the day just to calm your nervous system. That's all we're doing here. We're just calming the nervous system. We're not going through our triggers. We're not dealing with any trauma that might be coming up that's triggering us. We're not dealing with the stressors, the external stressors, the internal stressors. We're just taking a moment to calm our nervous system. When our nervous system is calm, our brain is like, oh, I don't need to fight back. I don't need to react. I don't need to respond. I don't need to get angry. So now we have a moment to be like, okay, from this calm state, what would I do? I probably wouldn't react to that. I probably wouldn't yell at that kid. I probably wouldn't yell at my coworker. And imagine doing that throughout the day, even 3 times a day. Then going home, I really recommend most people have to commute. So having that moment when you go home, use your commute. This is my personal development time. This is the time I'm going to strengthen my mental and emotional muscles and again, calm my nervous system. And the reason why I use calming the nervous system as one of the number one tools is because we can feel it physically in our body. So, what I mean by that is we know when we're in a calmer state because we start to relax. We start to just be like, it's like when you take a deep breath at the end of the day, that's what I'm saying. It's like, oh, finally. So you're doing this multiple times a day. And that's programming your brain to say, all right, she's got it. She's got this handled. I don't have to react and respond to this because she has it. So do that on your car, on your ride home. Don't listen to news. Don't listen to anything negative. Put good music on so that on that commute or a fun podcast or something funny, nothing where you're like, you have to use mental bandwidth again because it's just too much, or listen to news and now your emotional body is reacting again because most of it's negative. And then when you get home, you're obviously your external stressors aren't gone. The kids might still be like, give me this, give me that, but at least you'll be in a calmer state. And I find that so helpful. And then you got to tackle whatever the kids want, right? Like that external stressor is not going away. You're just giving yourself an opportunity to prepare yourself for it before you get home by calming your nervous system.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And
Yeah.
the other aspect too of life has changed. Now spouses are living at home, so but they
Yes.
used to be living apart. So and you mentioned your
Mm-hmm.
fire Italian background, and that was one of the other things we struggle with is just communication. Like for
Yes.
example, a typical thing, my wife will say something about you should do this, and then I get sort of
Yeah.
insulted because it's like I've already thought through something, planned very carefully, and then so I'm like, well, do you think I'm stupid? Not like, and then she gets, and then it's just like things escalate from there, right? So, what would you
Yeah.
suggest helping like between spouses, in their communication?
So I have an acronym that one of my amazing friends, she's a Myers-Briggs practitioner, and she's teaches communication, and she taught me this many years ago, and I love, and it's called think. So it gives you a moment to think before you respond. And so before you respond and say to your wife, do you think I'm stupid? Well, so the think is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? So, my husband, I was very open and communicative with him one day about the fact that Mondays I need all the internet bandwidth. And he got on and he did an upload. And I was about to rage on him and yell at him in his basement office and be like, how dare you? Did I not already tell you this? And I'm like, just a second, think for a moment. That's not helpful. Instead, I went down and I just gently reminded him, like, I'm sorry, I don't know if you realized Monday, I'm just reminding you again. He's like, oh my God, shit, sorry, I forgot. See, typically we don't know what we don't know. We're
Yeah.
also just reacting, right? In our everyday moments. So yeah, in those moments, just take a pause. Like, is this thing I'm going to say actually going to be helpful, or is it going to compound the situation
Yeah.
even more? And then ask yourself, what do I actually need in this situation? So for me, my need is on Mondays, I need you to be gone and off the internet because I need it all. I need it all. I need it all. Right. That's a very clear need. And I think that's so important, is to just get very clear about what you're actually asking for, and then allowing your partner to do the same, right? So sitting down and saying, listen, we're working from home. This is challenging. We're not going to do it perfectly. I'm probably going to get mad at you sometimes, but what can we do? And this is actually a time to use project management, right? Like, use project management to manage your household and your workday now that you're working together. All right, you need this. I need this. I need these blocks of times. I need this quiet time, whatever that is. Just communicate with it without the defenses going up. Bring the defenses down, because people say to me all the time, well, I keep telling my husband this, but he's not listening. And I'm like, no, you're not telling him. You're screaming at him. You're yelling at him. You're blaming him. And he's not responding because he feels like no matter what he says, he's wrong. And it's like, once we just change it and we put the defenses down instead of just wanting to be right, all of a sudden everybody gets heard and everyone's needs get met. But it's going to take some planning. It's
Mhm.
difficult sometimes because, like, I know it's a big ask to tell my husband, I need, like, from this time to this time on Monday, I need the internet. Like, we cannot have you uploading. I cannot have you do this because I'm doing that and then I can't do anything else. Like, it's just one of those things
Or
because
maybe you need to get a better internet system, right? That can like
oh yeah. And
accommodate the whole like upgrade to the next level, right?
oh, and we absolutely, and we did that too, right? Like, we have like one of the greatest internet systems now, which is wonderful. But Mondays are my podcast day, and I have to upload it, and it takes so much bandwidth, right?
Oh
So
yeah, right.
it's so interesting, but it's like, I know it's a big ask sometimes, but when we communicate to it, but I also give him the time, and he's like, okay. I'm like, well, what do you need? He's like, I just need you to tell me before you upload that podcast so that I know that then during that time. So now I just yell down. I'm like, do you need the internet right now? Because I'm uploading a podcast and it says it's going to take 38 minutes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's
So,
just all about
yeah.
communication and setting
Yes.
expectations and being clear. And as you said,
Yeah.
having schedules. I need to do this at this time. I need to do this at that time, and
Yeah.
blah blah blah. And just the communication is so important. And as you said, like taking the breath before you respond. Wait a
Yes.
minute and ask. Think. I love that. True, helpful, inspiring. Was it needed?
Necessary.
Necessary and kind, right?
Yeah, usually it's
Necessary.
the necessary one that we have to use because we want to be reactive. So we'll say something like snooty, sarcastic, right? So
Yeah, it's
it's
true.
like, is this necessary? And is it actually going to help the situation? Which usually
Yeah.
not, because the whole part of positive communication is bringing the defenses down. Bring those defenses down.
Well, the other thing too
Someone's,
is that the way that you're raised a certain way,
oh
and
yeah,
the way your parents communicated,
Yes.
That's what you, and I see this too with my wife. Like, she talks to say how her parents would communicate,
Mm-hmm.
whereas my parents were very different, and so
Yes.
they don't really gel together in sort of the way that, like, she generally comes in with a negative, and like, and whereas with my family, it's like the communication was a lot more sensitive, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like you have to kind of walk, else someone's going to be very insulted. So it's I think that's another thing, is really understanding
Very.
where some coming from. We did actually some counseling with Brian Tohana, and one of the things we were talking about is the empathy communication, and
Yeah.
like, first of all, acknowledging what the other person is saying, and you told me that
Mhm.
this, so like repeating what they say, and
Yes.
then repeat it back. So it's like the actual, also, acknowledgement, rather than just being also on the defensive.
Yes.
Was a
Make
big
sure
eye
you
opener.
really understand what the person's asking for and communicating to you, because there are so many factors. I have to remember I'm a feeler. So I won't say, if someone says, what do you think about this? I'm like, well, I can tell you how I feel about it because I'm a feeler. And my husband's a thinker. So I'm not, like, for me to communicate to my husband based on the way I like to be communicated to will never work. So I need to use logic with my husband and steps, like, you're direct, right? So
Mm.
that's very helpful. When he's talking to me, he needs to use the feeling aspect of it, which is so important. So it's really understanding that we are two different human beings, and we also have our upbringing. Like, I was raised in an Italian family, and it was loud, and we spoke over each other. We didn't finish sentences because we just figured it out. It was just like, no, 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 I know what you meant. Whereas my husband, I'll kind of speak in that way sometimes, and he's like, you didn't even finish your thought. And I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah, I'm speaking to you. I forget, right? So it really does help. And then we were also very reactive growing up as well, just like a lot of, like, we react in anger and then it's out, and 8 seconds later it's like, oh, I love you, like, that was so good. So, like, in my upbringing, it was just up and out instant, and then it was dealt with and handled. So I have to remember sometimes that that's not how my husband was raised, and he's like, why are you so friggin' angry? I'm like, well, let's just get it out now. And then 5 minutes later, I'm like, I forget about it. So it gets confusing to people who were not raised the way you were raised, right?
Mm. Okay, perfect. I might be having some internet issues, but
Yes,
this has
that's
been
okay.
fantastic, Laurie. Really
Yeah.
appreciate your insight today, giving us the techniques of thinking, the Myers Briggs, taking 5 breaths,
Yeah.
the saboteur versus the inner guide, being aware, and also the great things you've learned from being a project manager, problem solving, planning, scheduling, being
Yeah.
proactive rather than reactive. So it's been wonderful to learn from your insight today. This has been great. And where can we, for maybe I'll send your information to my wife as well. But where can we find you to get some life coaching?
Everything is contagiously positive. So my website is contagiouslypositive.ca. Instagram, it's contagiously underscore positive on Instagram, where I love to spend the most of my time. And I'm also on Facebook, contagiously positive on Facebook as well. So it's all things contagiously positive for me here.
This has been a contagiously positive experience talking with you today, and look forward to hearing you at Adapt and Overcome on this coming Saturday, June 19th. And really excited to hear what you have to say then.
Oh, thank you so much. This was so wonderful. I love having these conversations. So I so appreciate taking the time that you took the time to have this conversation with me.
My pleasure.